briefing for Wednesday, the 22nd of March. I'm back. So, malicious packages in package repositories is nothing new. We've seen various things come and go, and it is something that hopefully by now most developers are aware of. However, there are reports of malicious packages being hosted from the NuGet, I think it's pronounced, repository, which is a .NET software repository. That one is newer. There are, it is more famous that, or more well known rather, that malicious software is hosted in other repositories. However, so this malicious code may be less well documented, and may not be as serious as some of the stuff that's hosted in the Python or JavaScript repositories, but it is something that's worth being aware of. And something else which is definitely worth thinking about is that some files get executed, or some code is executed immediately on being installed. So that is a challenge. Whilst I can, you can see why, if package repositories have got particular bits of code, they're a bit of code that you think you need, or it's a dependency, or downstream dependency from something else that that you're trying to do. You may want it to run immediately. But you've just got to be careful that if you are installing stuff or allowing packages to install stuff from repositories, that if they will install and run straight away, you've got to be pretty certain that it's not going to be malicious when it runs. So accidentally installing them into your projects or finding them as a dependency could be a problem. And this is it's a generic issue, not specifically for NuGet repository. But watch out. So if you're a .NET developer and you use this particular package repository, be aware that there are malicious code in there which may find its way into your applications. So we've spoken a fair amount about ChatGPT, amazing thing that will not only write your articles for you, it will write your code, including it can be tricked into writing malware. It has been known to try to persuade you to leave your partner and run off into the sunset with it. So it does have its bonkers moments. We've also spoken about the risks of using online tools in general, but very specifically artificial intelligence tools, where you are considering uploading confidential data. So, I think one of the examples that we mentioned the last time we talked about this sort of stuff was a doctor asking ChatGPT to write an email, or write a letter rather, to a patient about a particular condition that they had. Well, the information that you put into ChatGPT is not private. No matter what you would like it to be, it isn't private. And that this is the same for all these online tools, stuff that you upload into VirusTotal, for example, which is is a tool I use a lot. We use a lot at that security company. Any.run, any of these tools. If you upload stuff into those, they become available one way or another, available to a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily want to have access to the stuff that you're uploading. So unless you have got a specific contract that says, your data remains ring fenced, which you can get with VirusTitle and the other cyber tools. So watch out for that. However, it has come to light that despite the fact that ChatGPT doesn't claim to be to maintain your privacy particularly, there has been a bug whereby chat histories have got mixed up. So your chat history may have components in it from somebody else's chat history. So, well, regardless of the fact that you really shouldn't be considering anything you put in there private, you don't really expect it to be publishing your chat histories to all sorts of other people that you don't know. So watch out for this stuff. Just be careful if you're putting information up into any cloud tool. Be aware it's not private. If you're giving it to an artificial intelligence tool, consider the fact that the clue's in the name. It's artificial intelligence. It will learn from what you give it. That means it may well use that information when somebody else asks similar sorts of questions. It may look at it and say, Stephen does X, Y, and Z. Somebody else has asked me about this, so I'll tell them what Stephen does. It's that straightforward. So just watch out. The chat feature the chat history feature has been taken down whilst they're fixing it. I'm not sure whether it is back up or not. I haven't been on ChatGPT today so far. So just be aware, if you find your chat history has gone, that's because it was leaking your data and they've taken it down to fix it. And then finally, from me today, there is a report out that is looking at cybersecurity breaches survey from 2022. Key findings from that are out. Nothing particularly surprising in there. The usual sort of stuff. There's good awareness of cybersecurity issues. The majority of organizations, something like 82% of organizations, agree that cybersecurity is a high priority. Larger organizations tend to understand this better than smaller organizations. Most organizations rely on their own IT teams for cybersecurity. Around 25% appear to rely on outsourced expertise if security has been breached. So an interesting and slightly concerning fact is that 16% of organizations never update the senior leadership team or the board about cybersecurity threats or attacks. This is a particular problem in retail, food, hospitalities, utility, and manufacturing industries. So what's that? Everything except finance. So that is concerning, because one of the other things that comes across from this report is that getting budget for cybersecurity remains challenging, and probably the biggest reason for it remaining a challenge is that it is difficult to get the narrative around risk understood at a board level. Less than a quarter of businesses have got a formal cybersecurity strategy. We've got to say those that have been surveyed, but I think it's a pretty decent survey. But 43% of businesses have got cybersecurity insurance. Many appear to be doing this in order to get access to expertise on breach recovery. Only about 7% have made a claim on their insurance. So I think that's interesting. And we've spoken before on this podcast around the insurance approach to cybersecurity, and I remain with my firm belief that insuring against it actually won't really make much difference in the end if you don't protect against it. And insurance companies are beginning to question whether they're going to pay out if they consider that you're not well prepared for the attacks. So Interestingly, and probably not something that you would gather from looking at what gets into the media. There's been a reduction in the number of viruses and other types of malware, including ransomware, in the last year. However, phishing scams are, remain the most common attacks that organizations suffer from. Something like 4 in 10 organizations have reported cybersecurity breaches of some sort or another. The phishing being more than just delivering malware, phishing can be send something that appears to come from the CEO to the finance department saying, please pay this invoice, blah, 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 that sort of stuff. So, remaining vigilant around phishing, I think, is a definite takeaway from this. Again, we're talking here really about sort of basic cyber hygiene. Make sure people are aware of things, make sure you've got decent technical controls in place, make sure you've got your strategy there, ensure that there is the ownership of cyber risk lives with the risk people and the risk processes in your organization. It's not just something that IT fiddles with, all that sort of stuff. So 2/3 of businesses do have an incident response plan, but generally that's a generic incident response plan rather than being specific to cybersecurity. So it may well be something to look at, making sure that the incident response plan, a good plan, by the way, a good idea, rather, to have a overarching incident response plan, but it needs to have parts in it that are specific to cyber attacks, because the impacts can be different to other sorts of risk, and potentially the ways that those are handled and dealt with may be different as well. Most organizations believe that ransomware poses a high risk, but they, I think, they appear to be more concerned about the reputational hit that they would have, rather than the actual attack, the effect of the attack, which I think there's partly there's a little bit of good news in that, because it does mean that most organizations do now believe that they can recover from catastrophic failure. So perhaps ransomware attacks are moving more into a BCP type scenario. These are things which can cause issues that the business needs to plan for contingency, rather than being something that is completely ring fenced and totally different from everything else the business does in that space. So I think that's a good thing. Understanding about reputational damage is also a good thing as well. So if organizations are being hit by ransomware, making sure that the communications to the both internal and to the outside world and customers, making sure that they're well handled, and timely information is being provided that basically demonstrates that you're ideally demonstrates that you're on top of things, you're going to sort it out. Yes, there's a problem. Yes, you've implemented your your incident response plan. Yeah, you are recovering from it, those sorts of things. And that will limit the reputational damage. It doesn't completely eliminate it, because you have been hit, but organizations that make a mess of their comms do tend to suffer from a bigger reputational hit than those that manage their comms well. And that means, of course, when you're designing your incident response plans and designing these things in line with your BCP, the corporate communications team absolutely has a part to play in this, and definitely need to be involved in things. Basically all of this stuff needs to lift itself out of the technical world. There's a lot of technical work to do, but overall these incidents need to be understood and run in the same way as any other business impacting issues would be run. Anyway, that's enough from me. I have overrun slightly myself here, so I will have a good day, and I will speak to you tomorrow.